how would you define classic rock?
Classic rock is, well, the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear classic rock, you think of the biggest bands. You think of Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, The Who, that sort of genre. Something that starts around the late 60s, goes right through to the late 80s. Now, when you start looking at other bands past that, funny enough, when we play a song from Pearl Jam, some of our listeners might say, "Oh, why are you playing some of that newer stuff?" And maybe time has gone quicker, that they don't realize that Pearl Jam's 25 years old. But for some reason, maybe it's a sound, because first thing that people think of is Zeppelin or Van Halen or the Stones, like I mentioned, or Deep Purple. That's that big sound, that analog recording sound. That's basically what classic rock is. There was a 20-year period where everything went digital, and everyone liked the convenience. Download a song, but it took the intimacy out of rock and roll and full albums, because you couldn't go to the record store, buy the album, unwrap it, put the needle on the record, listen through side one, listen through side two, admire the album art. A lot goes into that album art, and that was missing for a good 20 years. And for some reason, and I never saw this coming, but albums are coming back, vinyl's coming back, and even the younger generation is going, wow, this is really cool. So in the history of rock and roll, there's like that 15, 20-year absence of vinyl, which, the full analog experience of classic rock is coming back. One of the things about classic rock is, like that old phrase, it never dies. In fact, I think it's making the biggest resurgence it ever has. Vinyl's coming back in a big way. Some bands are actually reforming and touring again. And if you've ever taken a look at a lineup waiting to get into a Rolling Stones concert, keep in mind these guys have been performing for about 50 years. 50 years. And when you look at the lineup, you're seeing people who are above 50, but you're seeing 20-year-olds in there. And they're holding their tickets, and I've actually seen this. They're holding their tickets going, yeah, we're going to go see the Stones, as if it was the 60s. Or, it's the longevity of it. Classic rock is here to stay, and it's always going to be something that's appreciated. Studies have even shown that some of the most popular rock and roll being listened to right now is from the 70s. It's kind of weird, but it's a fact. And when vinyl is coming back, we even have a show here on Dave Rocks that plays a full album feature Sunday nights at 9. And people are loving it because it's different.
Do you need to have a certain amount of longevity as a band in order to qualify as classic rock?
Well, to qualify as classic rock, classic is a part of it, right? So obviously it has to be a little bit older. And yeah, you're right. There's a lot of bands who are mimicking that sound now. They're bringing back that sound. Monster Truck, many bands like that are just bringing that kind of sound back. Sheepdogs as well. And you can't call them classic because they have a classic rock sound, but they're not from the 60s and 70s. I'd love to call them classic rock, but they're new. There's always room for another great band, and for it to fit in classic rock, it's going to have to wait a while, unfortunately. Anytime you look up rock news, even go to the classic rock forums, David Grohl is doing something that's just incredibly rock and roll attitude. He breaks his foot on stage. He plays it right up. He goes, yeah, man, I'm just going to keep playing. That's rock and roll. Rock and roll has always been about rebellion. It's always been against the grain, right back to the blues roots. Chuck Berry, My Ding-a-Ling. I mean, people go you hear that on the radio in the 50s, and you go, whoa, you can't, that's, like he's singing about, that's My Ding-a-Ling. Rock and roll's always been about that. You got the Stones, they've always, they had blues roots. There's many songs you can't play of the Rolling Stones on the radio. That's the rock and roll attitude. David Grohl goes up on stage, breaks a foot, keeps going with the show. He brings people up from the audience, has them play. He might use language, but that's rock and roll again. The attitude is right there. It's not just a sound, it's a genre, and it's an attitude. And it's right there, and it comes right out of your speakers, right at you every single time. There's no such thing as rock and roll that behaves.
Hey, thanks for watching. My name is Daniel Sarkisian. I'm an independent filmmaker from Toronto.